Okay, hello everyone. I believe we are live. The presentation I'm giving today is Ready for the Change, how to prepare for the new overtime rule. My name is Marcus Runwick. I'm an attorney at law, and I am the Director of Research and Publications here with the firm. I'm a little bit new to the technology, so let me find my advanced button. Okay, I am from the south suburbs of Chicago, specifically Frankfort, Illinois. I've been an attorney since May 6, 2004. I've got undergraduate work in business and in accounting. Initially, when I started here, I started in research because I was not yet an attorney. I kept doing research and I started going to court. I also started doing tax returns as they realized that I could do them. Lately, we've been doing a lot of education with LawLine and my tax courses online. The LawLine is a continuing legal education and continuing professional education for lawyers and CPAs. The My Tax courses online are courses that we teach for tax preparers. It adds a little bit of credibility to their line of work. And lately I've been getting a little bit more into technical work, state filings, articles, books, presentations. And of course, this is my first presentation with Google Sheets. So the way that I'm going to present this to you is like this. What is the FLSA? That is the Fair Labor Standards Act. I'll give you some background. We'll talk about the law as it currently is. We'll talk about the exemptions from overtime protection. The new amount is huge. It more than doubles the previous amount of $23,660. It goes to $47,476. We will talk about the effect of the law, frequently asked questions if we get to them, and we will conclude. So without further ado, the Fair Labor Standards Act is found in Title 29 USC Chapter 8, covers the entire chapter. If you print it out in Word form, you're talking about 50 to 60 pages. I would probably not recommend reading it, as it is quite archaic and you just simply probably will not understand it just reading through it. There have been significant amendments made, and the original 1938 Act had a 40-hour work week, and the minimum wage was 40 cents per hour. That was down from 44 hours a week, which people typically worked. The intent of that was to increase the number of workers. 10 workers working 44 hours a week is the same as 11 working 40. That was the intent there. The overtime is time and a half. The current minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. The time and a half of that is $10.87 and a half. There are exemptions. The FLSA also covers child labor laws, which we're not going to talk about because none of that has really changed. The act itself applies to employees, not independent contractors, not volunteers. How do you know the difference between an independent contractor and an employee? Well, there's a 20-part test that the IRS has. If you get this wrong, you also get it wrong with the IRS. You will mess up the withholdings for that worker, the employee, and my experience has been is that the penalty for that is around 100%. It's nothing that you want to mess with. Just to go through a few of the points on the 20-point list. Must the individual take instruction from your management staff regarding when, where, and how work is to be done? If the answer is yes, you probably have an employee. Does the individual receive training from your company? Is the success or continuation of your business dependent on that person? Must the individual personally perform, or can they have their own worker do it? Have you hired, supervised, and paid individuals to assist the worker? Is there a continuing relationship? Must the individual work set hours? If yes, you probably have an employee. If not, you probably have an independent contractor. Does the person have to work full time? Do they have to be on your premises? Do they have to give you reports regarding his or her work? Is the individual paid by the hour, week, month, or per the job? You reimburse the individual for expenses. If yes, you have an 14. Do you supply the needed tools or materials? If yes, my guess is you do have an employee as opposed to an independent contractor. Have you made a significant investment in facilities used by the person? Is that person free from suffering a loss? If yes, they're probably an employee. Those are some of the factors on that list, and you have to know the difference there. Get it wrong here, you get it wrong with the IRS as well, not good. Also, anybody can volunteer with a couple of exceptions. You can't profit from that individual's labor. If you have a person come over to your house and you go out and cut lawns all day, you make money and they don't, you don't have a volunteer. You can't do that. Also in the public sector, I look at James Anthony Trafficant. What he did was he had his own employees volunteering at a ranch. You can't do that. He went away for a little while. A lot right now, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. You have to work 40 hours per week, then you get overtime. However, if you do work employees over 40 hours a week, generally you get burnout. Of course, this study was at the University of Zaragoza in Spain. Work culture is a little bit different over there. As you can see, you've got your under-challenged monotony, administrative and staff services. Women are 3 times more likely to be affected by this. Also, you get people that are worn out. If you've worked at the same job 16 years, you're probably worn out by then. And then there is frenetic. That is the number of hours worked. If you work 30 to 40 a week, generally you get employees that get burnout. You want to rethink that if you're working people that much. The highest minimum wage in the United States is $10.50 an hour. Washington, D.C. However, they're not necessarily a state, they're more a district. Massachusetts and California, they're $10 an hour, that's the highest. Again, we have $7.25 in the United States per hour, China and India, 80 and 30 respectively. Switzerland actually does not have a minimum wage, but they have such a higher standard of living. Generally, whenever you negotiate with your employer, you're talking about $14.31 an hour minimum, which is, wow. Minimum wage is required unless you fit into an exemption. Right now, you've got the executive exemption. The pay test applies for $4.55 a week. It will be $9.13 a week starting December 1, 2018. That's a Thursday. You also look to the duties of that particular person. The employee's primary duty must be managing the enterprise, managing and custody. The employee must be engaged in doing that, and they must have authority to hire or fire. That is the people into assistant managers and working them 50 to 60 hours a week. There are some lawsuits going on right now with little companies that you might have heard of. One is called McDonald's, the other one is called Walmart. There's also the administrative exemption. This applies to, again, the pay test of 455 now, 913 on December 1. The employee's primary duty must be performance of office or non-manual work directly related to the management of the general business. And the employee's primary duty includes the exercise of discretion and independent judgment. That is your administrative exemption. Professional, which applies to learned professions, okay? And it also applies to the creative professional, which, let's see here, it says performance of work requiring invention, imagination, originality, or talent. That's artistic. Again, the pay test does apply $455 per week, $913 per week as of December 1. Next exemption is computer employee exemption, pay test $455, duties, the application of systems analysis, technique, procedures, including consulting with others, and the design, development, documentation, analysis, creation, testing, modification of computer systems. Third, the design, documentation, testing, creation, modification of computer programs, or a combination of the above. That is a $455 demand. As you will notice, outside sales, there is no pay test for that one. It's like your door-to-door salesperson. The requirement there is that the primary duties must be making sales or obtaining orders or contracts for services or for the use of facilities, which are consideration will be paid. The employee must be customarily and regularly engaged away from the employee's place of business. Then you got your highly compensated rule. This is also a change. It was 100,000. Now they've come up with 134.04. Kind of curious as to how they got that, but they did. The exemptions specifically don't apply to blue-collar mechanics, equipment operators, custodians. And there is also another non-exemption, can't be an exempt, police, firefighters, paramedics, first responders. So right now we've got the issue of why is the amount so low? The current amount is $455 per week. That comes to $23,660 in a year, if I got my math right. The family of four federal poverty level for 16 is $24,330. So you're right near at the clinch of poverty. If you're told that you're an executive, they give you a contract says these are your duties. But if they sit you down and say, oh yeah, by the way, I kind of serve tables too, you're not going to be exempt. You're going to be subject to this. The minimum wage, if you work that out, is $15,080, and in Illinois, it's $17,160. That means that if you're on salary, you're earning 156% of minimum wage, 138% in Illinois, but can be required to technically work 50, 60, 70 hours per week if your employer says that you're under the executive exemption. Now, they have to honor what they say in your contract. If you're working, keeping French fries coming or whatnot, you're probably not exempt, and you should be getting overtime, and you should be paying that person overtime. Now, I use the classic example of fast food manager. You got to comply with the duties test. So under this, President Obama talked to the labor secretary and said, we got to do something here. We can't have this going on in the United States. You get paid to work. New rule, pretty much everything stays the same, but the new amount, as I've said, I believe is $47,476, up from $23,660, the pay test. It also automatically updates in 3 years. That is part of the new rule. It goes into effect 12/1/2016, a Thursday. They don't give you the weekend to comply. Now, what is significant about this is, according to the Department of Labor, it applies to 4.2 million workers, which is actually 3.39% of the working population, which as of May 2016 was 123,600,000 people. That is the entire state of Connecticut and more, and 4,000,002 is the state of Montana's population 4 times over. By way of comparison, 123,600,000 to China, they have a working population in urban areas of 359 million. 3 times what we have, and then you compare it to what they have in rural, which is 440, they've got a working population of 800 million people. Next slide. What about lawyers and doctors? We're exempt. And this is from fact sheet 17B. Teachers, practice of law and medicine, some journalists, maybe, maybe not. But if you're employing a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher, you can pay them whatever the market dictates. Now, there are a couple of issues with this new 47.47.6 requirement. One thing that I didn't build into the presentation is if you have somebody under contract and their contract says 23,660, you're going to have to bump up their pay. You're going to have to rewrite that contract, or they cannot come to work Thursday morning at 8 a.m. on December 1 because you would be in violation of the law. Second thing is you want a time clock. Walmart has run into a big problem with people working over. So now it's not like in the 80s where you had a manual timestamp clock. You know, we've now got electronic, computer, online, web-based. We here use AMG attendance. It tends to work well. There is also a learning curve. So if on November 30th, you decide to get a time clock, you'd better have a formal training that night. What I would recommend is you get compliant today. There are issues that usually you have to work with. Not everybody is computer savvy. You know, it's just a fact. The audits on this can be announced or maybe not. They might just walk in and say, hey, where are your records? And what you want to do in the first meeting with the auditor, you want to convince them that you are as compliant as possible and that you in no way, shape, or form are violating the law. That will carry some faith with the auditor. And also, your employees have to know what they do, and they can't be working outside those job descriptions. We're a little bit past our time here, and I don't want to go too much longer. But what about tipped employees? Well, the minimum wage on that is $2.13 per hour, and they have to get tips of $30 per month. If they work, let's say, to use easy math, 10 hours in one work week, they have to make $72.50 in that work week, or the employer must make up the difference, okay? The minimum wage for students is 85%. Full-time students, doesn't matter if you're in high school or college, 85% of the 720. How often does the minimum wage increase? I believe under this new law, it's every 3 years, the amounts do go up. The 47.47.6 does go up, but usually the minimum wages, that only goes up from time to time. What is a work week? It can't be any longer than 7 days. Your employer can pretty much set that. Usually it's Monday morning, 12:01 a.m. until something like Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Does the FLSA grant vacation time? Nope. Does the FLSA affect sick time? No. If you've got a concern about that, you would want to go to the FMLA, which is the Family and Medical Leave Act. The big thing about this law is, you know, it wasn't a significant change in the law. You know, it wasn't a whole lot of pages that changed. But what did change was the amount where the pay test of 47.47.6 to 23.6, or from 23.660. Now, the statistics on that are this big part of the population that's going to be affected. Some employees might require a small bump up in pay. Others may have to require a wage adjustment. You're going to want to substantiate the the records. Auditors don't wait around for them. It's not like, they can say, give me your files, and oh, well, I need next week to fabricate them. They're not going to go that way. Also be ready on December 1. Again, that's a Thursday. Get an electronic computer clock, update the contracts, teach the people time in and time out, and reduce duties to writing. You don't want your employees to sit down with the auditors and say, well, we kind of do all this other stuff, but yet we're limited to our paycheck. A little bit of what we do. We do business valuation and succession planning here, as well as Department of Labor audit and IRS audits. We do a little bit of local stuff. We do education, like I said, LawLine, and my tax course is online. If you're interested in anything, go ahead and sign up. And with that, thank you for your time, and hopefully we can talk in the future. Thank you. Bye.